Rising, are you there? Linda? Hey, Linda! How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm so thrilled that you are with us. Not all the people understand the magnitude of this session, but it is amazing, amazing that you join us. No, thank you, thank you. Who wants to introduce Linda? Michal, Limor?
It's an honor to introduce Linda.
It's an honor. It's really an honor. Okay.
Thank you.
So go ahead, Limor.
So, thank you so much, Linda, for joining us. Linda is an Agile thinker from Nashville, Tennessee. And we had the privilege to also join a workshop of Linda a few years ago and experience her book of Fearless Change and to experience the pattern there. So I'm really thrilled to hear more and learn more from you. So thank you, Linda, for joining us.
Thank you. Shall we see if I can share my screen? Is that possible?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Is that good? Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So we're going to talk about incentives. Do they work? What's the research? I like to talk about science and evidence. Normally we hear a lot of good stories, a lot of experience, which is valuable, absolutely. But we also need to look at what the scientific evidence shows. So that's what I will do today. We're going to talk about incentives. And if you don't get to ask a question, I know you have lots of other rooms to hang out and talk to people. Here's my contact information. You can share questions or ideas. And if you'd like to have a copy of these slides, I'm happy to send it to you. There is no copyright on any of the slides. They're yours. You can change them. You can do whatever you want. And that's true for any talk that you might see on YouTube or on the web anywhere. If you'd like to have the PowerPoint, not a PDF, but a PowerPoint, I'll be happy to send it to you. And then finally, let's connect on LinkedIn. So why are we still talking about incentives? And I think the answer has to be an experiment that everyone knows about. It happened in the late 1800s by a Russian scientist named Pavlov. Everyone knows what Pavlov did. He was working with animals, specifically most of the time dogs. And what he did was train a dog to respond to a cue. He tied the cue to food, and after a while he found that he didn't even have to feed the dog. All he had to do was give the cue, whether it was a click or a whistle, a sound, and the dog would respond. What Pavlov did was change the history of psychology. Until this day, we still believe this. We still follow the results of Pavlov. This flavor of psychology, or the idea that he started, is called behaviorism. And it is still with us. Even though the evidence shows that this is not how we as humans make decisions or do work, perform tasks, that carrots and sticks don't work, but somehow we seem to be stuck in the 1800s. We seem to be stuck believing that this is how people operate, including our own children. We believe if we just have the right rewards or the right punishments, that people will behave the way we want them to. There's a picture of his dog. I love animals. I have lots of animals in this talk. Not only are animals interesting, but we know that some of these animals were either around or tied to our ancestors, and that we evolved because of their behavior. You might not recognize this guy. He's also very famous, and he built his work on that of Pavlov's. It was Frederick Winslow Taylor. Now, he wrote a very famous book called The Scientific Principles of Management. And at the time, he did amazing work. He tried to scientifically analyze what people were doing to try to make it better, to try to make the production of tasks more efficient. He measured. I know you've just heard a talk about metrics. I believe in metrics. I believe in measurement. What Taylor did was good. The problem with Pavlov, the problem with Taylor, is that we know more now, but we are not running our organizations based on new information. We are stuck in the past. We all say we are agile, but we incent workers based on research that is hundreds of years old, and we are not looking at the new information. What Taylor said was that work is made up of simple tasks. And most of those tasks are, well, they're pretty straightforward. They're not very interesting. And the way you get people to do what you want them to do is incentivize, provide the right incentives, and then watch them. Well, that was true. When Taylor was doing his work in the early 1900s, that was true for most work. But now, the work that we do is not a series of repetitive tasks. Most of us are not working on an assembly line where we do the same thing over and over and over again. I would hope that if your team is measuring velocity, you would remember that. What your team did in the last iteration is not the same as what it did in the iteration before. Data must reflect reality. And if you're counting things as the same when they are not, I don't care what tool you use. We say in the metrics world, garbage in, garbage out. If you have the illusion that 3 of these things is the same as 3 of those things, then your metrics are meaningless. They're based on work that was done in the 1800s and early 1900s. We're still locked into this. Managers especially. They believe that somehow if they organize people in an appropriate manner, that they can be more efficient. That there is a good way to work and a bad way to work. I'm guessing that most of you have been on lockdown. You've been forced to stay at home, and many managers are very uncomfortable with that. They want to see what you're doing. They feel they don't have control over your work if you're not there. I believed at the beginning of the pandemic that most organizations would say, this is really working well. Perhaps we don't need an office anymore. Perhaps people can stay at home. But now what I hear from managers and executives is, we don't like this. We can't see what people are doing. How do we know whether they're really working? Or maybe they're just sitting around all day in their pajamas, watching television, playing video games. What's really bad is that we take Pavlov's work and Taylor's research and we apply it to ourselves. We believe it. We believe we should be working more efficiently, measuring our performance, that somehow our tasks could be done better. We don't allow ourselves to take a break. People I talk to now find that even though they are working at home, some of them are working all the time because they can, and they feel guilty if they take off any time at all to take a break, walk around, play with their children, take their dog for a walk. They feel they're not really working. They're not being very efficient. We bought into Taylor's message big time. We need to pay attention to the new research and see what it shows. Let's talk about another researcher named Harry Harlow, who was also doing experiments with animals. He was trying to reward monkeys for doing puzzles. He gave them raisins, and he noticed something very strange. That before he had even offered raisins, when he gave the monkeys an interesting puzzle, they began to work on it right away. And they seemed to, well, this might be a stretch. The monkeys seemed to enjoy it. They thought it was fun to work the puzzles. They didn't need the reward of the raisins. What they got from the experience was something new that nobody had measured before. It's called intrinsic motivation. I do it because of the task itself. I love solving puzzles or doing this task. I don't need a reward. Doing it is my reward. It changed psychology's forever, because up until this moment, psychologists believed that people and other animals only do something for one of two reasons. One, survival, a biological need. They do it because it's necessary for the survival of the species. And the other reason number two, because of a penalty or a reward, carrots or sticks. Harry Harlow said, no, we're missing something. And it's more important than the other two. People will do something, monkeys will do something, dogs will do something because they enjoy it. Intrinsic motivation. Not only did Harry Harlow add a new kind of motivation, he did experiments showing that if you reward the monkeys, then they don't enjoy it anymore. It actually decreases their motivation. Well, Harry Harlow's research was not accepted at the time. What was popular in psychology was behaviorism. Taylorism. That's what people believed then, and that's what people believe now. That people only do something because of the reward or the penalty, and they don't pay any attention to the joy, the intrinsic reward. That's true for management and organizations today. There's a very famous game in psychology. It has to do with pairs of subjects who are working together. And in the pair, one of the members is given a certain amount of money. So for my example here, let's suppose we give player A in a pair $10. And the way the game works is player A can take the $10 and give to player B a certain amount of money. Now, if player B says, well, thank you for that money, I think I will take it, that would be the rational thing to do. Then the game ends and both players get to keep that money. Now, if player B, for some reason, says, no, thank you, I will not take that money, then the game ends differently. The game ends and nobody gets anything. Now, why would player B turn down free money? Why would player B say, no, I don't want any money? It doesn't make any rational sense. And the reason, of course, is that when player A offers player B money, the amount given to player B is too small. And player B says, no, I will not take that money because it's not fair. You get to keep $8 and you're only giving me $2. Or worse yet, you keep $9 and I only have $1. I would rather have nothing than to let you have what I think is an unfair piece of this money. Fairness. We care a lot about fairness. The problem in organizations with incentives is that when we see someone else get a bonus or a reward, we compare it. Well, I worked just as hard as he did. He got a bonus and I did not. It breeds resentment. Before the bonus, it breeds competition. All the negative elements that are involved in rewards come into the environment. But the biggest obstacle is fairness. If we don't feel that the system is fair, we are very unhappy. One of the things I've learned in going to lots of Zoom conferences is that I can't share a video with you. This is the most famous video of fairness that has ever been produced. It's from the research of Frans de Waal. So you're going to ask for this PowerPoint. You will have this link, or you can go to YouTube, Google on capuchin, fairness, monkeys, Frans de Waal, and it will pull up the video for you. You should watch it. It shows that even capuchin monkeys care about fairness. This is something we have inherited from our ancestors over 6 million years ago, and we still carry it with us. We know that incentives do produce results, a very famous study of a pizza organization in the United States. They wanted to do something good. They wanted children to read more. So they suggested that they give children free pizzas for reading books. The more books you read, the more free pizzas. This was from a case study by Teresa Amabile at Harvard Business School. What she saw was children did read more. That's true, they did. But they read easy books, short books, simple books. They didn't really spend a lot of time with them. They read them very quickly so they could add up points and get more pizzas. What they learned was if I read a lot of books so that I can count, again, metrics, I will count how many books I've read, then I will get more pizzas. They did not learn that reading is a good thing. They did not get any intrinsic reward. They were only reading for the sake of extrinsic rewards for pizzas. So the unintended consequence was a lot of fat kids who don't like to read. And when the program stopped, they stopped reading. That's one of the problems with incentives. When the incentives stop, so does the behavior. Do rewards motivate students? Of course, there have been so many experiments with so many different kinds of students, so many different kinds of rewards for so many different kinds of activities. Do they work? Yes. They motivate students to get rewards. The intrinsic motivation never appears. And in fact, in all of these studies, students grow to dislike the activity. That's what they learn. This must not be worthwhile. Otherwise, why would they be incentivizing me? Exactly what we don't want. We know that this also happens in the workplace, that incentives do not motivate. Incentives demotivate, destroy intrinsic motivation. The facts are clear. There is no question that in all circumstances where people are working to get rewards, that undermines intrinsic motivation. The research is clear. The research has been validated, and yet we continue to do it. Steve Levitt in Freakonomics said, no matter what incentive scheme you come up with, you think you're so smart. You think you're so clever that you can find a way to incentivize your children or your team, the people in your organization, to do what you want. No matter how clever you are, they're going to find a way around it, as the children did for Pizza Hut. They only read short, simple books just to get more pizza. They will find a way. People are very smart. Dan Ariely is the author of Predictably Irrational. He's an Israeli behavioral economist who works in North Carolina University. He has done a whole host of wonderful experiments that show the problems with bonuses and rewards. In many of his experiments, he uses layered compensation. So in this particular experiment, there were 3 groups. One group got a very small bonus, not really much. Another group got a medium-sized bonus, and another group got a large bonus. almost everyone who hears about this experiment expects that those who got the small bonus would not perform as well as those who got the medium bonus. And those who got the medium bonus would not perform as well as those who got the large bonus. And that is exactly the opposite of what Ariely found. What he saw is that the small and medium bonuses, well, showed essentially no difference. And those who got the large bonus were worse. No matter what the assignment was, the kind of task they performed, large bonuses resulted in negative productivity. When Ariely has shown the results of his experiments to students at Harvard Business Review, to executives at corporations, they don't believe it. And of course not. Executives at large corporations get huge bonuses. Would that change how they see this evidence? I think so, indeed. Is there anything that incentives do? Yes. If it is, as Taylor noticed, some boring, repetitive task, just as the assembly line workers that he measured, if it's boring, if it's repetitive, if someone is doing the same thing over and over and over again, yes, incentives do work. People who have a bigger bonus or who are paid more, they do better. And if it's a one-time, very closely related, we all know that we have just lost Tony Shea at Zappos. He instituted an amazing bonus in his company to the new trainees. After a couple of weeks of their initial training, said, I will give you $3,000 to quit now. Some people took it, but for those who did not, it made sure that they were working at Zappos because they wanted to. It meant something to them. They cared about the work. There's also something called loss aversion. We care more about losing than we do about gaining. The ratio has been measured. It's about 2-to-1. So there have been several experiments with loss aversion. If you would like to try this in your organization, if you are interested in incentives, you could have a small experiment. So this is from a company that decided they would experiment with a bonus. One group said, if you perform better, we will give you a bonus. Group 2 was told that they already had the bonus. It's already been given to you provisionally. We have a special bank account where that money has already been deposited. Now, if you don't perform, we will remove the bonus. You would think, if this were an experiment that you were doing, that there wouldn't be any difference. But there was. The second group that saw that deposited money and knew they could lose it, they worked much harder, about 50% harder, which is statistically significant. A famous experiment was just done recently. We know that organizations want people to exercise more. So again, an experiment. Group A, they were given $42 at the beginning of each month, and they took away $1.40 every day they didn't exercise. Group B was simply given $1.40 each day when they exercised. They were compared with a control group that got no reward at all. Was there a difference? There should not have been. These two programs are exactly the same. But as in the example we just saw, Group A looked at a loss. They saw the $42 and realized they could lose it if they didn't exercise. Group B was being rewarded. So we know that by 50%, Group A performed better than that. It does make a difference. We hate to lose. If you do want to reward people, give them the reward first and take it away if they don't meet it. The evidence is pretty clear that that does work. Benjamin Zonder wrote a wonderful book called The Art of Possibility. The Agile community loves this book. And he said at the beginning of every class, we should give every student an A. Give them an A at the beginning and say, you can keep this as long as you continue to do good work, do well on your exams. You will keep this A. It's exactly the same as the experiments. Give them so that now they face a loss, and it would be much more rewarding, much more motivating. We know that there are two areas in your brain that light up when you get a reward. One of them is the pleasure center. It runs on dopamine. The other one has to do with working with others and cooperating. What we know about your brain is you cannot activate both of these areas at the same time. They are in conflict. So research has shown that when you offer a reward for doing something, you activate the pleasure center. Money generates dopamine. And when you do that, you destroy cooperation, working together, and you institute conflict and competition. Be careful. Be careful what you wish for. I have a good friend who trains dogs for search and rescue. She told me something interesting. She said there are two kinds of dogs. One kind of dog is trained to find, well, people who have died as a result of an accident or an attack. Another kind of dog is trained to find people who are still alive. And when you have an enormous disaster, this is a picture from the Oklahoma City bombing in the United States, or 9/11. When you have an enormous disaster, both kinds of dogs are brought in because the need is so great. And if it's a huge disaster, the dogs that are trained to find living people don't have much success. Most of the time it's too late. The people who are found have already died. And the dogs know that. And they become very unhappy. At the end of the day, if they haven't found anyone who is alive, they become discouraged. They know that's how they get their sense of duty, feedback, accomplishment. Can dogs feel that? Clearly they do, and the trainers know it. So the trainers of those dogs came up with an idea. At the end of the day, the trainers would hide in the rubble so the dogs could find them. And the dogs were so happy. The people were happy. When I heard that story, I thought that is a metaphor for good management. Would your manager do the equivalent of hiding in the rubble to make sure that you had a sense of purpose, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of feeling that what you had done all day was worthwhile? I have had many managers like that who have brought in free food, who made sure that I had everything I needed, who took good care of me, just as the trainers did. I hope that if you're a manager, or if you have a manager, you work toward this as a goal. This is the biggest incentive. We want to feel like we matter, that what we do has purpose. Dan Ariely did a very famous experiment with Lego robots. He asked students to come in and he said, would you like to build a Lego robot? And they said, oh yes, we would. And he said, fine, I will pay you $2. Here are the instructions. So the student built a robot. At the end, Dan Ariely said, okay, would you like to build another one? This one, I will only pay you $2 minus 11 cents. So the experiment revolved around how many Lego robots the student would build, given the decreasing reward scale. Initially $2, then 11 cents less, then another 11 cents, then another 11 cents. Now, the student who builds the robot can see how many robots have been built. They line them up. Of course, the student knows that when he or she walks out of the room, all of these Legos will be dismantled for the next student. That's the motivating condition. We will call that condition A. In the experiment, they're compared with a demotivating condition, or condition B, where when the robot is built and the experimenter says, would you like to build another one? I will pay you 11 cents less. And while the student is building the next robot, the experimenter dismantles the previous robot right in front of the student. Now, why should that matter? The students all know that they're going to be dismantled anyway when the experiment is done. Surely no student participant believes that they're going to keep these robots around forever. But in one condition, it doesn't happen until the student is finished and walks out of the room. In condition 2, it happens right in front of the participant. Would it affect how many robots a student would build? And the answer is yes. In the meaningful condition, where the student could see all of the robots lined up, on average, a student would build 11, 10 and a half, 11 on average robots before they said, okay, that's enough. I don't want to build any more. Whereas in condition B, where they saw the robots destroyed right in front of them, they only built about 5. It did matter. They could see what they had just done, destroyed, torn apart, right in front of them. It was so demotivating that even in an experiment, it had a huge statistically significant impact on how many robots they would decide to build. Now, some people don't really like robots or Legos, but others do. And Ariely found that in condition A, there was a correlation between the number of robots actually built by a participant and how much they enjoyed it, how much they liked Legos. Whereas in condition B, there was no correlation. It didn't matter whether they liked robots or Legos. No correlation at all. And Ariely's conclusion was, if you take something people love and put them in a meaningful condition, the joy they get from it dictates their effort. They will work harder if they enjoy it. But if you take the same people, the same love of Legos or any activity, and put them in a meaningless working condition, you will kill any joy they might have. Killing the joy. That's what it's become in many cases. That's what Agile is trying to say. It's not talking about any one of the pair programming or daily stand-up. It's talking about the joy we get from what we do. That's actually been studied. It's not only been studied, there's a book about it. This was a giant longitudinal study of software developers. It was done by Teresa Amabile at Harvard Business School. And her conclusion, we like meaningful work. Of all the events that can deeply engage people, this is the single most important. The book is called The Progress Principle. We don't do it because we're paid. Of course, we have to have money to live, but that's not the motivator. The motivator is we feel we're doing something that matters. What we do at the end of the day is make progress on something that has meaning. We know work matters. It's not something we just do. Teresa Amabile calls it inner work life. It's so important.